All right, Georgia and Charleston Southern after the Bulldogs take care of Auburn. Georgia coming in, I think, 10th in the playoff standings this week. That's a significant number. If Georgia uh, doesn't get to the SEC championship game and wins the last two games, they'll be favored in both games. If they win both of those games, that means they will almost certainly have to play in either the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, Discover Orange Bowl, or whatever, Capital One Orange Bowl, one of the sort of BCS level bowls. Obviously, the SEC championship is still out there. The way Georgia handled Auburn, and the way they've handled some teams this year, there's no question that they can play with anybody in the country. I think if you're Georgia fan, you couldn't possibly want anything more than for Tennessee to trip up Missouri. The Vols are favored. And really, Missouri has two tough games left to go. They have to beat Tennessee in Knoxville, and then they'll have to beat a surging Arkansas to win. So let's go straight to the questions. I'll review statistically where Georgia's at in the SEC. This is obviously Georgia's concluded their SEC season, but they are averaging 42 points a game, which is almost 5 points better than everybody else in the conference. The rushing offense is number 2 behind Auburn. Rushing defense number 9 and number 6 in scoring defense. So Georgia's being very efficient with the football, and they are deadly at Sanford Stadium. The two teams that play best, it seems to me, in their home are Georgia and Alabama, and we could see those two playing at the Dome if things go the way it seems like. Right now, Georgia's number 2 in rushing, number 10 in passing offense in the SEC, 6 in total offense, and then, of course, number 1 in scoring. They are 9th in rushing defense, 2nd in passing defense. Suddenly, that group has figured everything out. And then number 5 in total defense and 6th in scoring. I think the big thing, if you're Georgia and you can get to Atlanta, of course, they have no control at this stage, and they are near the top at everything except tackles for loss. They are 5th in kickoff return, 5th in punt return. They are 9 in interceptions, 7 in sacks, and then 11th in tackles for loss. They are number 1 still in turnover margin. They have not forced more turnovers than the Rebels, who have gained 27, which is really remarkable. But they have been more judicious with the ball than Ole Miss. Ole Miss still has 2 conference games to play, so their numbers could change as well. Georgia's averaging about a turnover and a half a game. That happened this past week. Auburn obviously turning it over twice. Twice that I remember. Once with Nick Marshall throwing a pick to Marlo Herrera. Nick Marshall didn't look great at Georgia. And then with the Quan Bray turnover on the punt return, which really changed the momentum of that game, I have to say. Georgia. Now, I mean, 5 teams can still win the SEC: Georgia, Missouri, Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, Missouri, Bama, Mississippi, and Mississippi State. So, of that group, Mississippi State certainly does very well offensively, but defensively, they're 12th in total defense. They, of course, are chasing Alabama, who has really gotten their act together. Bama at one time really was not great in general. They're still they're great in Tuscaloosa on offense, but they are 7-3. They are 7 in rushing, 3 in passing, 3 in total offense, and 7 in scoring. But on the defensive side of the ball, they are 1 against the run, 4 against the pass, 1 in total defense, and number 2 against in scoring. Obviously, Ole Miss needs a lot of help, I think. They are 10, 4, 7, 8, 5 against the rush in defense, 3 against the pass, number 2 total defense, and number 1 in scoring defense. So Bama and Ole Miss obviously have the best 2 defenses in the SEC. Missouri is struggling offensively. They are 8 in the run offensively. They are 12th in the pass, 13th in total offense, and 10th in scoring defense. So not great there. But the Tigers do okay on the defensive side of the ball. They're at 6 against the run, 7 against the pass, 6 in total defense, and 4 in scoring. So really a pretty good mixture there. And then obviously Mississippi State still has a shot to win it. they are relatively powerful on offense, probably the most powerful offense in general in terms of balance. They're 3 in the rush, 5 in the pass, number 1 total offense, and they trail only Georgia in scoring offense. But their problem is kind of the passing defense. They're number 3 against the run. They're 14th against the pass, dead last against the pass and defensively, and then 12th in total defense. 5th in scoring, so not that bad. That's a pretty wild move, but you could certainly see why Georgia could have its shot. Now, Alabama is doing great at home. They're not quite the same team away from home. Georgia has been pretty consistent. They've scored a lot pretty much everywhere. Defensively, they've gotten scored on in Athens. Tennessee scored on them a little bit. And they've gotten scored on the road in neutral, which would be South Carolina and Florida. So big physical teams could give Georgia some issues, and that's what Alabama, obviously, and Florida were. Georgia still has to deal with Georgia Tech. I'll talk about that a little bit more next week. Dixie Doggo 2 says, what's your take on the indoor practice facility discussions? Who are some of the guys in next year's recruiting class who you think will be on the field in Jacksonville? Let me actually skip that and come back to it because that's a long one. A couple people actually asked about what Jeremy Pruitt had to say. Hardcore Bubba says, what kind of role can we realistically expect from Isaiah McKenzie in future years on offense? Well, it depends. It kind of depends on where he fits in terms of the wide receiver position. It looks like he's going to be a wildcat guy. The question is, how much will he realistically be used as a receiver? I think they're going to have packages for him, but I don't think he's a traditional receiver. He's a little bit of a toy that they can use. He's pretty explosive. There's no question about that. But I think there's nothing wrong with him just being a special teams guy and then having packages on offense. That's what it looks like. I think he's like a poor man's Damian Gary. He's better as a special teams guy, which is really saying something. I don't think he's as advanced as Damian Gary was, who played at Georgia in the early 2000s under Mark Richt. I don't think he's as advanced as Damian was as a wide receiver, but he's a freshman. So, Swanee Doggo 3 says, I was hoping for at least one immediate commitment from the huge group that was at the game. Are any of those guys close to pulling the trigger? Do you see any walk-on punter situation? Yeah, punters have got to get it together for Georgia. They're pretty bad right now, at least Colin Barber is. So some issues there for sure. As it relates to, Georgia getting commitments, I think a lot of the guys that are left, like Roquan Smith and et cetera, they're kind of waiting for their spotlight moment. I mean, they're so deep in the ball game that they know. I mean, you got DeAndre Walker, Roquan. You've got some guys that Georgia's on that are committed to other schools. I'm sure when Florida has their, finds their coach, there'll be some playing back and forth on that front too with Georgia and Florida. And, if there's other ramifications, I mean, to me, it seems like Steve Spurrier's in his final season. Will that have any ramifications with South Carolina guys? It doesn't seem like it because Georgia doesn't really recruit against South Carolina too much. I don't think there's much to be concerned about. I think with Josh Sweat, DeAndre Walker, Roquan, kind of those bigger name guys, you're going to have to wait on them until January anyway. So they could be All-American guys that call, do the thing on TV. Georgia's, been known to just, that's not their big thing. I can't remember the last guy that picked Georgia on a all-star game. But anyway. Coming Dog 22. When the Fire Mark Richt talk came up, I thought it was dumb. Of course it's dumb. I mean, it never ends. I mean, Bob Stoops deals with the same thing at Oklahoma. But if Georgia was to fire him, seems like Pruitt is basically our coach in waiting. I know Bobo has been here longer and is a great offensive coordinator, but it really seems like Pruitt has all the pull. That's crazy. He asked if it's crazy talk or a possibility. Jeremy Pruitt's not going to be the next head coach at Georgia. He's certainly not going to be that coach in waiting. He is doing what he's supposed to do. I mean, he has basically come in and made Georgia more aggressive in recruiting. But here's a couple things that a head coach is required to do: deal with the media every day except basically Friday. Uh, Deal with the booster circuit. One of those two things, which is these coaches get paid $400,000. Mark Richt's contract's $400,000 to coach football. And it sounds just by the contract. All the other stuff is all the stupidity, like dealing with people like me. And right now, Jeremy Pruitt is meeting with the media about once a week, if he wants to. Now, that is not for me to criticize him in his current role. Jeremy Pruitt can do whatever he wants to do. I don't care. He can not talk to the media. He can choose to talk to the media on Tuesdays and then after the games. He can do whatever. I mean, that's irrelevant to me. If you start talking about being the head coach, that's a different ballgame. You got to help raise money for the university, not just the athletic department. You've got to. He's going to be the most visible person in the state of Georgia, behind probably the governor. He's not ready to be a head coach right now. He will be a head coach. He's not ready to be a head coach right now because he's not really, doesn't seem like interested in dealing with the stupidity of it all. And believe me, there's plenty of stupidity that goes along with being a head coach, particularly in the SEC. And I'll get back to the Jeremy Pruitt thing in a little bit because it all ties in together. How good is Nick Chubb? Who do you think he compares to? Oh, man. Nick Chubb is quite good. He probably compares to... He seems like he's not fat, but he seems like a fatter Robert Edwards, almost, something like that, maybe. I'm not great at comparing old guys. He is just... He's not as tall as Todd. He's not as good as Todd in the grand scheme of things. He played better than Todd in that Auburn game. He's not a playmaker like Todd. He's just like sort of a straight-up running back who needs to develop a little bit more. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but that a guy who probably will be either in the discussion certainly next year as one of the Heisman guys that needs to develop more, but he does. And you can see that now. If you're just talking about handing the ball off, there's very few guys I can think of that just don't stop the way that Nick is. That's why he's so good. I mean, the kid is just special in that sense. But Georgia also has Sony. In theory, Keith Marshall will be. I mean, it seems like Keith Marshall will be back in 2015 for sure. They've got one kid committed at running back, and they're looking for another. So they're still going to have a lot of guys. But I mean, it does look to me like Nick is going to be the guy. It's what it looks like right now. Now Sony's different, right? I mean, Sony's smaller, more explosive. He's to the house. He's not running people over. I mean, he's drastically smaller than Todd and Nick when you just look at them. Where will Terry Godwin play next fall? He will play wide receiver, and I do think he will make an immediate impact. He's one of the few spots where you can really change things is at wide receiver as a young guy. Running back, wide receiver, maybe defensive end or something like that, but there's not tons and tons. I mean, I've seen Terry play. I've not seen anybody in 2013 or 14, any class, Mitch Hyatt, Chuma, whoever, nobody's been better than Terry when I saw him play, when he played Heard County. He just was just that good. And I think, Georgia's getting a special player, and Bryson Ramsey's going to need somebody to throw to. Terry Godwin's going to be one of those guys. Rick Type, who would be ranked higher in your opinion, Georgia as a 2-loss SEC champion or Mississippi State with 1 loss? That's a really good question. A really, really good question. We don't know. Part of me says it will probably be Georgia because they would be the SEC champion. They would have beaten Alabama. I think that becomes a very complicated situation because Mississippi State's going to sit there. If what you're saying is right, they'll be an underdog at Ole Miss. We have like 4 different things have to happen. First of all, Georgia has to win 2 games to be a 2-loss SEC champ. Missouri has to lose a game. Then Georgia has to beat Bama. And then State has to beat Ole Miss and Vandy. So there's a slew of different things. But what you're talking about is not out of the realm of possibility. I think we're going to hear the committee beat our heads in about conference champions. and a 10-3 or a 9-3 or 10-3 Georgia as an SEC champion, that'd be tough. I don't know if they'd even knock Alabama out of the top 4. But a 2-loss SEC champion, if Georgia were to beat Bama and they're both sitting there at 11-2, Georgia's going to go over Bama. Now, will they go over State? I don't know, but I think if I were State, I'd be worried about Ohio State and the TCUs and the Baylors of the world, and Ole Miss. I mean, whoever else. So, I think whoever the champion is of all these conferences is going. I mean, if Oregon loses and is 11-2, and the team that they lose to is 11-2, you can't really take the team that just lost. I mean, that would be a heck of a statement that conference championships are completely irrelevant. Rick Tide asks again, will Todd Gurley be on the sideline for the Georgia Tech game where the pro cows with guys are hurt like that? Do you still hang around the team? Or are they ostracized by all team activities? Well, I expect him to be on the sideline this weekend against Charleston Southern, and if he's still, a participant in the pro. I mean, Todd can turn pro right now. I mean, he's never going to play again at Georgia, and that's what Aaron did after the Georgia Tech game, because Aaron and I were on the sideline together. I was like, why aren't you, in there with the team? And he explained that because he was no longer a part of the team, he couldn't be in the bench area. It would be against NCAA rules, yada, yada, yada. So, Aaron wanted to go on and sign autographs and do all these things. So we'll see what happens with Todd. But the only thing that would prevent him from being in the bench area, not necessarily on the sideline, and would prevent him from getting medical care, I guess, and I don't even know if that's true, actually, would be if he left. There's no reason for Todd to leave right now. He could just take it all in if he wants to, no big deal. Aaron, that's a good question, but if he's on the team, Aaron was not on the team during the Gator Bowl game. He was not on the roster. He declared himself eligible for the draft. He was done with football because of the ACL. Same thing with Todd. So Todd could go down the same path, but sort of unanswerable right now. But I expect him out there certainly this week against Charleston Southern. And the other thing too is, Todd could go through the senior thingamabob against Georgia Tech. Because we know he's not going to play. Aspen Dog asks, Dean will get any younger players that have not played this season standing out in practice, i.e., that have not played, i.e., No Sean Moreno in 06. Will Justin Scott Wesley get a medical red shirt? Well, Justin's already redshirted, so this medical red shirt is only granted for a 6th year. So the short answer to will he get a medical red shirt is we don't know that for a couple more years, but my guess is no, because he just won't want to be there for 6 years. How many players do you see leaving the program for this year's senior? I was talking with Chad earlier today, Chad Simmons. Right now it's 2 at the most, it seems like to me. It could be 3. You could have John Theus leave early, which I doubt, but it's possible. Todd Gurley's going to leave. And then you've got Leonard Floyd, who I think will probably leave, if I had to guess, just because of his situation with his family. And then Jordan Jenkins certainly could leave, but, will he? I don't know. It seems like Jordan won't. It seems like John Theus will not. So I think even if those 4 guys leave, and I don't expect them all to, you're still basically going to have the same Georgia team this year that you had in half the games, because Todd didn't play in half the games. So that will come back in 2015. They will probably be the favorite to win the East. They'll probably be ranked 10, 12, something like that. They could be, they could be ranked higher than that. I really don't know. As far as players standing out in practice, right now the answer is no. I mean, I think, Bryce Ramsey is going to be the starter. It depends on what you're talking about with standing out. I think he has particular skills that a lot of guys don't have on that team. I also do think, the quarterbacks in general, with Bryce, who will be the starter next year, and then I think Jacob Park has really done well on the scout team. He's taken it very seriously. So the quarterbacks have done well, but there's been no guy that like Jarvis in 2010 or No Sean in 2012, not that I'm aware of. So Not yet. Let's see. I know this is a number is fluid based on situations. What are we shooting for in this class? It's going to be like 30 or 31. Yeah, so you're saying 28 to 32. Yeah, it could definitely be in that ballpark. I've said for 12 months almost that this is going to be right in the ballpark, and people were confused at first, but I think now they're seeing why. Yeah, so I think it's going to be 30 or 31. Well, actually, you know what? One guy that's doing pretty well is Isaiah Wynn. Payne Hall asks here, Wynn and Sims look like they'll play substantially in 2015. Any positive information on the younger offensive line? Talking about Bynum, Cardiello, and Baker. Now, Baker just got there, right? I saw him play. He basically played defensive line for Marist. He's got a little ways to go. Cardiello, I think right now, Bynum right now is, Alden Bynum is a gaining weight situation. I don't think that any of these younger guys have been given up on by any stretch, but I think with Alden, it's been can't gain weight the way they want him to. I mean, 270 pounds is not big in this SEC. Now, Cardiello is going to have to fight Wynn for the starting center spot. Now, I think it probably will be Wynn, but we'll see. Cardiello is no dummy, and that's going to be a real fight. But that offensive line is basically going to have to replace their best player. Well, Greg Pike's probably the best player, but they're replacing basically the captain of the team in David Andrews, and that's not something that you just easily do. Not only that, you're going to have a brand new quarterback. Do you really? I mean, does Pike play center? I mean, do you really want a sophomore and a redshirt sophomore to be calling out what's going on? I mean, Bryce Ramsey is going to have to really play well and understand where he's at because, think about it. Matthew had Nick Jones. Ben Jones started by the time Aaron was there. He had started 2 years. Then Aaron got David Andrews. David Andrews got Hudson Mason. So that pitcher and catcher there, those guys, they're going to have to do some work in the offseason. Now, Wynn has the ability to do it. He has the physical capabilities to do it. You've heard people jokingly, non-jokingly, talking about how David would lose that job if Wynn was older. I don't believe that. They're joking, but their point is that Wynn is very advanced. Okay, so he's just got to learn what to do. Okay, so on back to this Jeremy Pruitt thing. You've got multiple things here. First of all, this should have been done a long time ago. Period. That's where Pruitt is 100% correct. That the University of Georgia does not have an indoor practice facility is absolutely stupid. Okay, not because, they've missed dog nights because of it. They've missed practices because of it. The indoor meeting facility is a total waste of space. Total waste of space. Basically, it's just a waste of space. It's embarrassing. You can thank David Evans for that. Now, number two, there are some practicalities involved here. They can't just throw the thing up. They got to decide where it's going to go. I'm assuming they're going to have to raise some money for it. It's probably going to be $20 to $40 million. I don't know. I just know I'm on the board of trustees where I went to college. We had a $14 million basketball facility, okay? And you can turn them around relatively quick, but you can't just throw them up. And we thought we were going to be able to get in there at this past January 2014. Well, it just drug on, the construction, weather, whatever. So there are some practicalities that Greg is talking about, Greg McGarity, that Pruitt, didn't discuss. If it were me, and I should have studied this more before coming on here. If it were me, what I would do is this. I'd say it's really great that the track is where it's at, and I know people walk around it. But it's time for the football facility to be right there. And you can have easily, I would think, a 60-yard facility where that track is. There's nothing in the way. You could quickly demolish everything that's there, which is basically just stands and grass. And it would be there. The kids could just walk straight out. They could do, It would be simple and easy. That's the place to do it. There's no reason to get into buses and go down to millage. Just let track go down to millage. Let them always be down there. I mean, it's not. The reality is, one is a revenue sport and one is not, and one needs to be in one central spot. And softball plays elsewhere. XYZ play at other places, and so there's no reason why track can't do the same thing. There's nothing. This is not me attacking track. If they decided they wanted to get rid of the baseball where it's at, that'd be. I mean, it doesn't matter. But the reality is, the $40 million part of the $100 million budget is football. So you have to have some sense here. Jeremy Pruitt's role at Georgia is this, okay? It's to some degree, it's to shake things up. Well, first of all, it's to win football games. But it's obvious that he knows that Georgia has some, like every large organization, has some inefficiencies is the best way to put it. One of them is that they don't have an indoor facility. Now, I've been to South Carolina's. It's a disaster. It's gross. Been to Clemson's. Pretty nice. The point is, all you need is something where you can escape the weather occasionally. Something where you can get in there and just say, hey, this is another thing that we have because we're in the SEC. And then we're just hemorrhaging money, left and right. I don't think they're going to have it ready by this time next year. I just don't. And it doesn't mean Georgia's completely failed and all these idiots that start talking about how Greg McGarity is... No, that's not it. It's that, they're going forward with it, but, you're not going to just build it in 8 months, say. Just call it 8 months. I mean, you can build it in 8 months, but you could have a Dallas Cowboys situation where the thing falls down on you. You don't want that. I mean, you want something that's going to be there for the long haul for kids who are 10 years old right now. They're going to come in there, they're going to play, and that's it. Now, guys like Bryce Ramsey, Park, Lorenzo Carter, yeah, all those guys are going to get the indoor practice facility. Does it hurt Georgia that they don't have it? We don't know the answer to that. Like in terms of recruiting, it doesn't help that they don't have it. I can assure you of that. It is odd to me that having traveled all around that Southeastern Conference, and as nice as Georgia is, there's no reason they shouldn't have it. So Pruitt is correct. Greg is correct. Actually, they're all correct. By the spring of 2016, they will have it. And that's just what I think. Now, I don't know the political dynamics, why Pruitt did what he did, but I think he's right. I mean, I think he's right on the 40,000 foot view of things. Georgia should have an indoor practice facility, period. And there's so many things you can do there. I mean, like if you most people that watch this are not like me. They don't just walk around the Butts-Mehre and can, know the lay of the land and know that there's 2 grass fields and there's 2 turf fields and that, you don't want to necessarily build on the grass fields because you play on grass and you don't want to go to Sanford all the time to wreck the grass, so you want your grass fields. Well, if you sacrifice the grass fields, you're going to have no grass fields. You're always going to have to go to Sanford. That's a pain in the ass, okay? It's just not a huge pain. It's not like going to Flowery Branch, but just put the thing on the track. Then you still got your you've got 2 turf fields at the bottom, what I call the bottom. You've got 2 grass fields, and you'd have your facility, it doesn't have to be more than 70 yards. It doesn't have to be 100 foot. Nobody does 100 foot. You do basically the kickoff moving forward, okay? That's all you got to have. But it also gives you the ability to hang more banners and to, wine and dine recruits. I mean, on Saturdays in Athens, they basically have that indoor practice facility. Well, the indoor meeting space. This past Saturday, they must have had a zillion kids in town, and it's tough. I mean, there's... At a land-grant school like Georgia, you should be able to spread out all you want to. They're clustered in there pretty good. And in the weather, I don't know. But look at it. I guess the question was, what should we make of Jeremy Pruitt coming out of his bunker to tell us Greg McGarity is going to get it done? I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't care. It's odd. I mean, obviously Jeremy wants something that he doesn't yet have. And I don't disagree with that, but I also know, having contributed and helped build a $14 million facility, they don't just pop up. There's all sorts of reasons. so that part, there's going to have to be some slight patience on. But he is dead right. There's no reason Georgia should be without it. It's just no reason. It's just stupid. I mean, Clemson's drastically smaller in terms of revenue than Georgia, and they've got one. I think virtually everybody in the conference except Georgia and Florida has it. And when you're in as competitive a marketplace as Georgia is, you got to have all them fixings, all the bells and whistles that you can possibly have. You need all the gravy to go with the turkey. You need everything you can have, and that's where Jeremy's right. Him being aggressive, nobody should take that for him being rude. I think he's right, but I think that there are some practicalities that are going to be involved. Okay, Georgia's going to kill Charleston Southern on Saturday. Sorry, Mark Rick, to burst your bubble, I should say. Dogs will kill Charleston Southern and get ready for a pretty big game with Georgia Tech. That Georgia not just going to walk over Tech, I can tell you that right now. They didn't walk over them last year. Anyway, all right, Dean Legge Show.